Helga Martinez stared at her phone screen, her thumb hovering over the post button. The words she'd typed seemed to burn through the glass. Finally escaped the prison guard who calls herself my mother. Freedom tastes better than her burnt casseroles ever did. She knew what would happen once she hit that button. The notifications would explode, her friends would rally around her, and maybe, just maybe, someone would finally see the truth about what it was like living under Patricia Martinez's iron fist in their cramped Seattle apartment. What Helga didn't know was that in exactly 47 minutes, 3 sharp knocks would echo through their front door, changing everything she thought she understood about her life. But let's start at the beginning, 3 days earlier, when everything was still predictably suffocating in the Martinez household.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Helga Martinez was 17 years old and felt like she was drowning in plain sight. Every morning, she woke up in the same small bedroom she'd occupied since they moved to the Greenwood neighborhood of Seattle 5 years ago, when her mother, Patricia, had finally scraped together enough money to escape the studio apartment they'd shared in South Park. The walls were still the same pale yellow Patricia had painted them, a color Helga had begged her not to choose, but had been ignored about, naturally. Patricia Martinez worked 2 jobs, mornings at Cascade Community Health Center as a medical assistant, and 3 evenings a week cleaning offices downtown. She'd been doing this grinding routine for as long as Helga could remember, ever since Helga's father had walked out when she was 12. The abandonment had hardened Patricia in ways that seemed to calcify more each year, turning her into someone who saw potential danger in every friendship Helga made, every text message that lit up her phone, every minute she spent away from home. "Mija, you don't understand how the world works," Patricia would say, standing in the doorway of Helga's room like a sentry. "I've seen what happens to girls who think they know better than their mothers. I've seen them pregnant at 15, dropping out of school, ending up with nothing. I won't let that be you." The irony wasn't lost on Helga that her mother, who'd had her at 19 and struggled as a single parent ever since, was so determined to prevent history from repeating itself that she'd created a different kind of prison entirely. Every aspect of Helga's life was micromanaged. Her phone was checked weekly, her internet history scrutinized, her friendships evaluated and often deemed inappropriate influences. She wasn't allowed to date, couldn't attend sleepovers, and had to be home by 6 p.m. on school nights and 8 p.m. on weekends, hours that made her the mockery of Roosevelt High School. Helga's best friend, Madison Chen, lived just 3 blocks away in a house that might as well have been on another planet. Madison's parents were both software engineers who worked from home, spoke to Madison like she was an adult capable of making her own decisions, and whose idea of supervision was asking, "How was your day?" while actually listening to the answer. When Helga visited Madison's house, which happened rarely and only after extensive negotiations with Patricia, she felt like she was stepping into a parallel universe where teenagers were trusted, respected, and allowed to exist without constant surveillance. "Your mom loves you," Madison would say diplomatically whenever Helga vented about Patricia's latest restriction. "She's just scared." But Helga had stopped buying that explanation somewhere around her 16th birthday when Patricia had shown up at the school dance as a volunteer chaperone, specifically to watch her daughter from across the gymnasium. The humiliation of having her mother lurking in the shadows while she tried to have one normal teenage experience had crystallized something bitter and resentful in her chest. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. Helga had been accepted to a summer journalism camp at the University of Washington, something she'd applied to in secret using Madison's address for correspondence. When the acceptance letter finally made its way to Helga through Madison, she'd been ecstatic. Here was her chance to pursue her passion for writing, to spend 3 weeks surrounded by other kids who cared about storytelling and current events, to finally do something that was hers and hers alone. She'd planned her approach carefully, waiting until Patricia came home from her evening cleaning shift, making her mother's favorite chamomile tea, and sitting down at their small kitchen table with the acceptance letter hidden in her textbook. "Mija, I have something really exciting to tell you," Helga began, using the childhood nickname she hoped would soften the ground. Patricia looked tired, as she always did these days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a bun that had become frizzy during her shift, and there were cleaning product stains on her scrubs. She accepted the tea gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "What is it, mija?" "I got accepted to a journalism camp at UW. It's for 3 weeks this summer, and they provide housing in the dorms and everything. I wouldn't need any money from you. I've been saving from my tutoring job." This was partly true. Helga had been tutoring sophomore math students for months, though she'd told Patricia the money was going toward college savings. Patricia's face changed immediately, the brief moment of relaxation vanishing. "You applied to something without telling me?" "I knew you'd worry, but Mommy, this is a real opportunity. They only accept 30 kids from the whole state. It's for my future." "Your future is finishing high school and going to community college here, where I can make sure you're safe." Patricia's voice had taken on that familiar edge that meant the conversation was already over. "I'm not going to some camp where I don't know who's watching you or what kind of kids you'll be around." "But it's at the university. It's supervised. They have counselors and—"
The answer is no, Helga. End of discussion. That night, Helga lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something crack open inside her chest. She thought about Madison's parents, who would have been proud, excited, asking questions about the program and helping their daughter prepare. She thought about her classmates whose parents supported their dreams instead of suffocating them. And she thought about the acceptance letter, now crumpled in her wastebasket, representing everything she would never be allowed to become. The next morning, Helga made a decision that would change everything. She created a TikTok account using her middle name, Elena, and began documenting her life. Not the dramatic, exaggerated version that would make her look like an attention-seeking teenager, but the real, day-to-day reality of being 17 and feeling like she was living under house arrest. Her first video was simple, a tour of her bedroom, explaining the rules that governed her existence. "This is my room at 5:58 p.m. on a school night," she whispered into her phone camera. "In 2 minutes, I have to be in the living room for family time, which means watching whatever my mom wants to watch on TV while she scrolls through my text messages. Tomorrow, I'll show you what happens when I try to go to the library after school." She posted it without really expecting anyone to see it. But by the time she woke up the next morning, the video had 50,000 views and hundreds of comments from other teenagers sharing their own stories of overprotective parents. For the first time in years, Helga didn't feel alone. Over the following weeks, Helga's account grew. She documented Patricia's daily room inspections, the way her mother interrogated her about every phone call, the elaborate lies she had to construct just to spend an extra hour at school working on the newspaper. She never showed Patricia's face or used her real name, always referring to her as the warden or my supervisor. The comment section became a support group. Other kids shared their own stories, offered advice, and most importantly, validated what Helga had begun to suspect. That Patricia's level of control wasn't normal or loving. It was suffocating and counterproductive. "Your mom needs therapy," one commenter wrote. "This isn't protection, it's paranoia." "Have you considered calling family services?" asked another. "What she's doing might actually be considered emotional abuse." Helga had never thought of it that way before. Abuse was what happened to kids who got hit or neglected, not kids whose mothers cared too much. But as she read more comments and did her own research, she began to see Patricia's behavior through a different lens. The isolation, the constant surveillance, the way Patricia dismissed Helga's feelings and autonomy. Maybe it wasn't love at all. The final straw came on a Friday afternoon in early April. Helga had stayed after school to work on a story for the Roosevelt Rough Rider about the district's new mental health resources. It was important work, something that could actually help other students, and she'd gotten permission from Patricia to stay until 4 p.m. But the interview with the school counselor ran long, and by the time Helga gathered her things and caught the bus home, it was 4:47 p.m. She found Patricia waiting in the living room, Helga's laptop open in front of her, the TikTok account displayed on the screen. "Helga Martinez, want to explain to me who this is?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The silence in the Martinez living room stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Patricia's eyes moved between the laptop screen, showing Helga's TikTok account, and her daughter's face, which had gone pale as winter Seattle sky. The account had grown to over 200,000 followers, something Patricia was clearly calculating as she scrolled through video after video of what she was now seeing as her daughter's ultimate betrayal. 4 months, Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. 4 months you've been making a fool of me online? Helga's hands trembled as she set down her backpack. She'd imagined this moment dozens of times, but now that it was here, every prepared argument evaporated. "Mommy, I can explain." "Explain?" Patricia's voice cracked like a whip. "Explain how you told hundreds of thousands of strangers that I'm a prison guard, that living with me is like being in jail?" She clicked on a video from 2 weeks ago where Helga had shown the detailed schedule Patricia had made for her daily routine. "Explain how you made our private life into entertainment for people who don't even know us?" The laptop screen displayed comment after comment. "Your mom is toxic. This is emotional abuse. You need to get out of there. Call CPS." Patricia's face grew darker with each phrase she read aloud. "These people are telling you to call Child Protective Services on me, Helga. Your own mother." Patricia stood up, pacing to the window that looked out onto their quiet Greenwood street. "Do you understand what that would do to our lives? To my job? To everything I've worked for?" Helga found her voice, though it came out shakier than she'd hoped. "Maybe they're right." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that couldn't be put out. Patricia turned slowly, her expression shifting from hurt to something Helga had never seen before, a mixture of rage and devastation that made her mother look like a stranger. "Maybe they're right," Patricia repeated. "Maybe the people who have never met me, never seen how hard I worked to keep you safe, never watched me hold your hair back when you were sick or stay up all night when you had nightmares, maybe they know better than I do how to be your mother?" "You don't keep me safe," Helga said, the words pouring out now like water through a broken dam. "You keep me trapped. There's a difference, and everyone can see it except you." Patricia moved toward the laptop, her finger hovering over the keyboard. "Delete it. All of it. Right now." "No!" The word surprised them both. Helga had never directly refused her mother's orders before. There had been arguments, negotiations, pleading, but never a flat refusal. "What did you say to me?" "I said no. I won't delete it. For the first time in my life, I have people who understand what I'm going through. I have a voice that matters to someone besides you deciding whether it's appropriate or not." Patricia's laugh was bitter. "A voice. Is that what you call this? Making videos complaining about the mother who sacrifices everything for you?" "Sacrificing what?" Helga shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. "Your social life? You don't have one. Your dreams, you gave those up before I was born. You've made your whole identity about controlling me, and now you're mad that I'm pointing out how unhealthy that is." "Unhealthy?" Patricia's voice rose to a pitch Helga rarely heard. "You want to know what's unhealthy? Your father leaving us when you were 12 because he couldn't handle the responsibility of being a parent. Me working 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat while other kids' parents could afford to be relaxed about where their teenagers were every second of the day. Watching girls in our old neighborhood get pregnant and drop out because their mothers thought being a friend was more important than being a parent." "I'm not those girls." "How would I know?" Patricia shot back. "You've been lying to me for 4 months, creating secret accounts, talking to strangers online, telling our business to people who don't care about you beyond the entertainment value. How do I know what else you've been hiding?" Helga felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. "Because you never gave me a chance to show you who I really am. You decided when I was 12 that I was going to disappoint you, and you've been treating me like a criminal ever since." "I decided to protect you." "From what? From having friends? From pursuing my interests? From making mistakes and learning from them like every other teenager in America?" She gestured toward the laptop. "Those people online, they see that I'm responsible. They see that I get good grades, that I work, that I care about things that matter. The only person who can't see that is you." Patricia closed the laptop with a sharp click. "Those people online don't love you. They don't worry about you at 2 a.m. wondering if you're safe. They don't work 2 jobs to make sure you have everything you need. They're strangers who will forget about you the minute something more interesting comes along. At least they listen to me." The words hit Patricia like a physical blow.
She sat down heavily in her worn armchair, suddenly looking older than her 36 years. I listen to you. No, you don't. You wait for me to stop talking so you can tell me why I'm wrong. When's the last time you asked me what I wanted and actually cared about the answer?
Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the Seattle drizzle had started again, pattering against the windows like tiny fingers tapping for attention. I wanted to go to journalism camp, Helga continued. Not to rebel against you or to get away from home, but because I love writing. I love telling stories. I'm actually good at it, Mommy. My English teacher says I could get scholarships for college if I build a portfolio. But you said no before you even asked what the program was about. I said no because I was scared. It was the first time Patricia had admitted fear, instead of couching her control in terms of protection and wisdom. Scared of what? Patricia looked at her hands, weathered from years of cleaning chemicals and medical equipment. Scared of losing you the way I lost your father. Scared of making the wrong decision and having you end up like me, struggling, alone, watching your dreams disappear because real life got in the way. But that's exactly what's happening now, Helga said quietly. My dreams are disappearing and I am alone. The only difference is that you're the one making it happen instead of some random guy who might leave. Patricia flinched. It's not the same thing. Isn't it? You're so afraid of me getting hurt that you're hurting me yourself. You're so worried about me making bad choices that you won't let me make any choices at all. For the first time in the conversation, Patricia didn't have an immediate response. She stared out the window at their neighbor, Mrs. Kim, tending her garden, probably wondering if Mrs. Kim had ever seen any of Helga's videos, if the whole neighborhood knew about their family's dysfunction. The account has to be deleted, Patricia said finally. I won't negotiate on that. And if I refuse? Then you'll be grounded until graduation. No phone, no internet, no leaving this house except for school. And I'll be transferring you to online classes so you can't even have that. Helga felt the familiar cage closing around her, but this time something was different. The comments from her followers echoed in her mind. You deserve better than this. This isn't normal. You have rights too. I could call CPS myself, she said quietly. Patricia went very still. What? I could call Child Protective Services, tell them about the constant surveillance, the isolation, the way you control every aspect of my life. I've been documenting it for months now. I have evidence. You wouldn't. But as Helga looked at her mother, really looked at her, she realized that Patricia wasn't sure that she could predict and control her daughter's actions. I don't want to, Helga said. I love you, Mommy, but I can't live like this anymore. And those people online, they've shown me that I don't have to. Patricia stood up abruptly, walking to the kitchen. Helga could hear her opening and closing cabinets, probably trying to find something to do with her hands while she processed this new reality where her 17-year-old daughter held cards she'd never expected to be in play. When Patricia returned, she was carrying 2 glasses of water, offering one to Helga in a gesture that felt almost formal. What do you want? Patricia asked. The question was so simple, yet so unprecedented that Helga almost didn't trust it. I want you to delete the surveillance apps from my phone. I want to be able to make plans with friends without a background check on everyone involved. I want to pursue journalism, whether that's the summer camp or something else. I want you to trust me to make some of my own decisions and live with the consequences. Patricia sipped her water slowly. And in exchange? I'll delete the TikTok account. I'll be more open about what I'm doing and where I'm going. And I'll prove to you that I can handle more freedom responsibly. And if I can't? If I make bad choices? Helga considered this. Then we'll deal with it together, like a real family, not like a warden and an inmate. Patricia was quiet for so long that Helga began to think the conversation was over, that her mother was going to fall back on the old patterns of control and punishment. But finally, Patricia nodded. We can try, she said. But Helga, if this goes wrong, if you abuse this trust or put yourself in danger, there won't be any more negotiations. Do you understand? Helga nodded, feeling something between hope and terror flutter in her chest. After years of feeling powerless, she was finally being offered a chance to prove herself. The question now was whether she was ready for the responsibility that came with the freedom she'd been demanding. Neither of them realized that in less than 24 hours, that freedom would be tested in ways neither could have imagined.
The morning after their confrontation felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Helga woke up to find her phone on her nightstand, not plugged into the charger in Patricia's room as it had been every night for the past 2 years. When she picked it up, her heart nearly stopped. Patricia had actually deleted the parental monitoring apps. Downstairs, Patricia was making breakfast in their small kitchen, but the atmosphere was different. Instead of the usual rapid-fire questions about Helga's schedule, homework, and plans, her mother simply handed her a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. "I've been thinking about what you said," Patricia began, sitting down across from Helga at their small table, "about the journalism camp." Helga nearly choked on her orange juice. "What about it?" "The deadline was last Friday, wasn't it?" Patricia pulled a folded paper from her pocket, the acceptance letter Helga thought had been thrown away. "I kept this. I wasn't sure why at the time." "Mommy, the deadline—" "I called this morning, before work." Patricia's voice was careful, measured. "I spoke to the program coordinator, Dr. Jennifer Walsh. I explained that there had been some family circumstances that delayed our response. She said they had 2 spots still open and would hold one for you until Monday if you're still interested." Helga stared at her mother, trying to process this complete reversal. "You called them?" "I also asked about the supervision, the safety protocols, the housing arrangements, all the things I should have asked before I said no. Dr. Walsh spent 20 minutes on the phone with me, answering every question I had. She even offered to connect me with parents of kids who attended last year." The acceptance letter lay between them on the table like a peace treaty neither was sure how to sign. "There are conditions," Patricia continued. "You check in with me every day, not because I don't trust you, but because I need to know you're safe. You follow all the program rules, and you let me drive you up to the university for orientation instead of taking the bus." Helga felt tears she'd been holding back for months finally spill over. "You're really going to let me go?" "I'm going to try to let you grow up," Patricia said quietly. "It's terrifying, but I'm going to try." That afternoon, Helga did something she hadn't done in years. She called Madison with genuinely good news. She actually said yes? Like Patricia Martinez said yes to letting you live in dorms for 3 weeks? "I know, I can barely believe it myself." Helga was walking through Woodland Park, something that would have been impossible just 24 hours ago, without a detailed itinerary and hourly check-ins. "I'm literally walking through the park right now, talking to you, with no curfew panic or having to account for every minute. I stopped by the duck pond, watching families with young children feeding the birds. It's like I'm a real person suddenly." "What changed? I mean, yesterday you were posting videos about living under house arrest, and now she's letting you go to journalism camp?" Helga had deleted her TikTok account that morning, as promised. It had been harder than she'd expected. Those followers had been her lifeline, her validation that she wasn't crazy or ungrateful. But keeping her word to Patricia felt more important than the online community she'd built. "We had a real conversation, like the first honest conversation we've had in years. She told me she was scared instead of just laying down rules, and I told her how her rules were making me feel trapped instead of just complaining about them. And that worked. I think it helped that I stood up to her. Really stood up, not just argued. I told her I wouldn't delete my account unless she made real changes." Helga paused for a moment, watching a family of ducks swim in formation. "I might have also mentioned that I could call CPS myself if things didn't change." Madison was quiet for a moment. "Helga, that's actually pretty intense." "I know, but I meant it, and I think she knew I meant it." That evening, Helga experienced another first in years. She cooked dinner while Patricia was still at her cleaning job, not because she'd been assigned the task, but because she wanted to surprise her mother with something nice. She made Patricia's favorite dish, pollo guisado, following a recipe she found online and texting Patricia pictures of her progress. Instead of responding with corrections or concerns about her using the stove unsupervised, Patricia sent back heart emojis and "smells delicious from here." When Patricia came home at 8:30, tired but smiling, she found the table set with real placemats instead of paper towels and Helga waiting with a home-cooked meal. "What's the occasion?" she asked, although she was already reaching for the serving spoon. "No occasion. I just thought it would be nice." Helga served herself, then looked up at her mother. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about working 2 jobs to take care of me. I want to help more. Not because you're making me, but because I want to."
Patricia tasted the chicken and closed her eyes. This is better than mine. Don't lie to make me feel good. I'm not lying. You added something I never thought of. What is that? Lime juice? And a little cumin. I watched 3 different YouTube tutorials.
They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Patricia spoke again. Dr. Walsh sent me some information about the journalism program. Did you know they have kids from all over the Pacific Northwest? Some of them have already won state awards for their writing. Are you having second thoughts? Helga asked, trying not to sound anxious. No, I'm having proud thoughts. My daughter is talented enough to be accepted to a competitive program with kids like that. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed Helga's hand. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. The next few days unfolded like a slow-motion revelation of what normal teenage life could look like. Helga stayed after school to work on the newspaper without having to negotiate for permission. She went to Madison's house for dinner and wasn't interrogated about Madison's parents' political beliefs or what they'd watched on TV. She even went to a movie with a group of friends on Friday night. Chaperoned by Madison's older brother, but still the most social freedom she'd had since middle school. Most surprisingly, Patricia seemed to be adjusting to the new dynamic better than either of them had expected. Instead of anxiously calling Helga every hour, she sent occasional texts. How's the newspaper meeting going? Or, bring home some of those cookies from Madison's mom if she offers. The responses were natural, affectionate, nothing like the tense check-ins that had characterized their relationship for years. On Saturday morning, Patricia had a rare day off from both jobs. Instead of using it to catch up on housework while monitoring Helga's activities, she suggested they go shopping for supplies for journalism camp. I've never been inside the University of Washington bookstore, Patricia admitted as they walked across the sprawling campus. I always imagined I'd see it someday when you were a student here. You still might, Helga said, stopping to watch a group of college students studying under the cherry trees. I mean, if I can get scholarships. Dr. Walsh mentioned that several kids from the journalism camp have gone on to get full rides to good schools. Apparently, having that program on your application shows initiative and talent. They spent 2 hours picking out notebooks, pens, and a professional-looking folder for Helga's portfolio. Patricia even bought her a small digital recorder for interviews, she explained, though she suspected it was really an excuse to buy her something special. At lunch in the student union, Patricia looked around at the college students and faculty with something Helga recognized as wonder. I used to think places like this weren't for people like us, working class, first generation, no connections. But looking at you here, seeing how comfortable you look, maybe I was wrong about that too. You weren't wrong to be careful. You just maybe got a little too careful. Patricia laughed, and Helga realized it was the first time she'd heard her mother laugh genuinely in months. That evening, as they organized Helga's new supplies in her room, Patricia pulled out her phone and showed Helga something unexpected. She'd been researching journalism scholarships and internships. I found 7 different programs that offer money specifically for low-income students interested in media careers. And this one at Seattle University has a mentor program where they pair high school students with working journalists. Helga looked at the research her mother had done, pages of notes, printed articles, contact information for program coordinators. You did all this today? I did some of it during my lunch breaks this week. After I talked to Dr. Walsh, I realized I don't know anything about your field. If I'm going to support your dreams, I need to understand them. That night, Helga lay in bed thinking about how much had changed in just 1 week. She had her phone back, her freedom back, and something she'd never expected, her mother as an ally instead of an adversary. But more than that, she was starting to see Patricia not as the controlling authority figure who dominated her teenage years, but as a scared single mother who was trying to protect the most important thing in her world the only way she knew how. As she drifted off to sleep, Helga felt something she hadn't experienced in years: excitement about the future and gratitude for the family she had instead of resentment for the one she wished she had.
She had no idea that in less than 48 hours, everything would change again. But this time, the challenge wouldn't come from inside their family. It would come knocking at their front door, threatening to destroy the fragile new trust they'd finally learned how to build together.
The knock came at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, sharp and official sounding in a way that made both Helga and Patricia freeze in their tracks. Patricia had come home early from the medical clinic due to a scheduling error, and they'd been sitting at the kitchen table working on Helga's journalism camp application essays together, something that would have been unimaginable just 2 weeks earlier. "Are you expecting someone?" Patricia asked, her voice already tense with the kind of worry that had become second nature to her over the years. Helga shook her head, closing her laptop. "Madison's at volleyball practice, and everyone else knows to text first." The knock came again, more insistent this time. Patricia moved toward the front door, peering through the peephole before her face went pale. "Mija?" she said quietly. "There are 2 people here with badges." The words hit Helga like cold water. She knew immediately what this had to be about, even though she'd deleted her TikTok account over a week ago. Someone had seen her videos. Someone had taken her complaints about Patricia seriously enough to make that call she'd threatened to make herself. "Child Protective Services," one of the women said when Patricia opened the door. "I'm Sarah Coleman, and this is my colleague, Marcus Wright. We'd like to speak with you about a report we received concerning Helga Martinez." Helga winced at the use of her full name. She'd always gone by Helga, but official documents still listed her as Helena, something that immediately made this feel more serious and formal. "What kind of report?" Patricia asked, though Helga could see her hands shaking as she stepped aside to let them in. The CPS workers were younger than Helga had expected, probably in their early 30s, with the kind of professional demeanor that managed to be both friendly and intimidating. Sarah Coleman carried a tablet and a folder thick with paperwork, while Marcus Wright had a gentle smile that didn't quite hide the serious nature of their visit. "We received a call from someone who was concerned about the living conditions and parental supervision in this home," Sarah explained, settling into their living room. The caller provided specific details about restrictive rules, surveillance of digital communications, and isolation from peer relationships. Helga felt her stomach drop. Even though she deleted her TikTok account, the videos were probably still circulating, screen-recorded and shared by followers who'd found her story compelling. The internet never really forgot anything. "I can explain," Helga started, but Sarah held up a gentle hand. "We'd like to speak with Helena alone first, if that's all right. It's standard procedure to get the minor's perspective without parental influence." Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. "Parental influence? She's my daughter. I have a right to be present during any questioning." "Ma'am, you do have rights, and we're not here to take those away. But we also need to ensure that Helena feels safe to speak honestly about her experiences. This is just a preliminary conversation." "It's okay, Mommy," Helga said, though nothing about this felt okay. "I'll tell them the truth." Patricia reluctantly moved to the kitchen, though Helga could see her hovering just out of sight, probably straining to hear every word. "Helena, I want you to know that anything you tell us today is confidential. We're here because someone was worried about you. Can you tell us about your relationship with your mother?" The question Helga had been dreading was also the one she suddenly realized she wasn't sure how to answer anymore. 2 weeks ago, she could have filled hours describing Patricia's controlling behavior, the surveillance, the restrictions that made her feel like a prisoner in her own home. But now? "It's complicated," Helga said finally. "It was bad for a while, but we've been working things out. Can you tell us about the surveillance your mother had on your devices?" Helga's heart sank. They definitely had specific information from her videos. "She used to monitor my phone and computer, but she doesn't anymore. She removed all the apps last week." "And before that, how long had the monitoring been going on?" "About 2 years, since I was 15. Sarah made notes on her tablet. "What about social interactions? Were you permitted to spend time with friends?" "Not really before, but that's changed too. I've been hanging out with friends normally for the past week and a half." Helena, I need to ask you directly. Do you feel safe in this home? The question hung in the air like smoke. A month ago, Helga would have said no without hesitation. Not physically unsafe, but emotionally suffocated, psychologically trapped. But looking around their small living room now, seeing the journalism camp brochure spread across the coffee table, remembering Patricia's proud smile when she tried on her new college sweatshirt, the answer was more complicated. Yes, I feel safe. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Helena, sometimes when family situations change suddenly, it's because parents know they're being watched. We want to ensure any changes in your home are genuine and not just temporary responses to outside pressure. The implication was clear. They thought Patricia was only being nice because CPS was investigating. The terrible thing was, Helga couldn't entirely prove them wrong. How could she be certain that Patricia's transformation was real and not just fear-motivated damage control?
I understand why you'd think that, Helga said carefully. But the changes started before anyone called you. We had a big fight about some videos I'd posted online, and it made us both realize we needed to communicate better. You posted videos about your family situation? Helga nodded, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. On TikTok, I was frustrated and felt like no one understood what I was going through. I documented some of the rules and restrictions in our house. And those videos are what prompted someone to contact us. Probably. I deleted the account, but people screenshot things and share them. I'm guessing someone who saw them thought they needed to call. Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look that Helga couldn't interpret. Helena, we'd like to speak with your mother now, and then we'll need to do a brief walkthrough of the home. This is all standard procedure. Nothing you've said today suggests you're in immediate danger, but we do need to complete our assessment. When they called Patricia back into the living room, she looked like she'd aged 5 years in 30 minutes. Her usually neat appearance was disheveled, and she kept wringing her hands in a way that made Helga want to protect her. Mrs. Martinez, we'd like to ask you some questions about your parenting approach and household rules, Sarah began. I've never hurt my daughter, Patricia said immediately. Never. I work 2 jobs to provide for her. I help with her homework. I make sure she has everything she needs. No one is suggesting you physically harmed Helena, Marcus interrupted gently. But we did receive reports about very restrictive rules regarding her social life and digital privacy. Patricia glanced at Helga, and in that look, Helga saw not anger or blame, but a deep sadness that made her chest ache. I was overprotective, Patricia admitting. I made mistakes, but I was trying to keep her safe in the only way I knew how. Can you tell us about the monitoring software on her devices? I removed it last week. Helga and I talked, and I realized I was being too controlling. She's proven she can handle more responsibility. And before that conversation, how long had the monitoring been in place? Patricia's voice was barely audible. 2 years. The questioning continued for another 45 minutes, covering everything from Helga's grades, excellent, to her extracurricular activities, newspaper, tutoring, soon-to-be journalism camp, and the specific rules that had governed their household. Throughout it all, Helga found herself wanting to defend Patricia, to explain the context behind her mother's fears, to make these strangers understand that fear-based parenting wasn't the same thing as abusive parenting. The home inspection was brief but thorough. Sarah and Marcus checked Helga's room, noting the privacy she now had, the absence of surveillance equipment, and the college and career materials spread across her desk. They looked at the kitchen, the living areas, the overall cleanliness and safety of the apartment. Everything looks appropriate, Marcus said as they finished up. Helena clearly has her own space, adequate privacy, and access to educational resources. But Helga could sense there was more coming. However, Sarah continued, we are required to keep this case open for 60 days to monitor the situation. We'll need to conduct 2 more home visits during that period to ensure that the positive changes you both describe are maintained over time. Patricia's face crumpled slightly. What does that mean for my job? My employer runs background checks periodically. If there's an open CPS case... We understand your concern, Mrs. Martinez. The case is classified as services recommended rather than substantiated abuse, which means it shouldn't affect your employment. But we will be documenting our ongoing visits. After the CPS workers left, Helga and Patricia sat in their living room in stunned silence. The journalism camp brochures that had seemed so hopeful an hour ago now felt like evidence in a case neither of them had wanted to be part of. "I'm sorry," Helga said finally. "This is my fault. If I hadn't made those videos..." "No," Patricia said firmly. "This is my fault. If I hadn't been so controlling that you felt like you needed to tell strangers about our problems, none of this would have happened." They sat quietly for a moment, both grappling with the realization that their private family reconciliation was now under government scrutiny. "What if they decide the changes aren't real?" Helga asked. "What if they think you're just pretending to be different because they're watching?" Patricia looked at her daughter with an expression Helga had never seen before. Not fear or control or frustration, but something that looked almost like respect. "Then we'll prove them wrong," Patricia said. "Together. We'll show them that people can actually change, that families can heal, and that sometimes the best thing that can happen to a family is having an honest conversation about what's not working." But even as Patricia spoke with determination, Helga could see the worry in her mother's eyes. They'd finally found their way to each other, only to discover that the outside world was now watching, judging, and deciding whether their transformation was genuine or just a performance. The next 60 days would test everything they'd learned about trust, communication, and what it really meant to be a family.
3 weeks into the CPS monitoring period, everything Helga and Patricia had worked to rebuild began to crumble in ways neither of them had anticipated. It started with a phone call that Patricia received during her lunch break at the medical clinic. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the UW journalism program." The voice on the other end was professionally polite, but carried an undertone that immediately put Patricia on edge. "I need to discuss Helena's enrollment status with you." Patricia stepped outside the clinic into the Seattle drizzle, her heart already racing. "Is there a problem with her application? I thought everything was finalized." "We received some concerning information from the King County Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Apparently, there's an active investigation regarding your daughter's welfare." The words hit Patricia like a physical blow. "Dr. Walsh, I can explain." "Mrs. Martinez, I'm sure there are explanations, but our program has very strict policies about participants who are involved in any kind of child welfare investigation. We simply cannot accept the liability of housing a minor who may be at risk." "But she's not at risk," Patricia said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "The case is classified as services recommended, not abuse. We're working with the caseworkers. Everything is improving." "I understand this is difficult, but the university's legal department has reviewed the situation and their decision is final. Helena's spot will be offered to the next student on our waiting list." Patricia found herself standing in the parking lot, rain soaking through her scrubs, holding a dead phone, and trying to figure out how to tell her daughter that the opportunity they'd fought so hard for had just vanished because of a system designed to protect her. When Patricia arrived home that evening, she found Helga at the kitchen table surrounded by the materials they'd bought for journalism camp: notebooks, pens, the digital recorder, and a stack of articles she'd printed for research. Helga looked up with the kind of excited smile that had become common over the past few weeks. "Mommy, look what I found," Helga said, pointing to her laptop screen. "There's this journalist named Maria Ramos who started at a community college in Los Angeles, and now she works for CNN. She wrote this amazing piece about immigration stories that won a national award. I want to interview local immigrant families for my camp project and—" "Mija," Patricia interrupted softly.
We need to talk. Something in her mother's tone made Helga's smile fade immediately. What happened? Patricia sat down heavily across from her daughter, looking at all the camp materials spread between them. Dr. Walsh called today about the journalism program. And? They're withdrawing your acceptance. The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke from a fire that had just been extinguished. Helga stared at her mother, trying to process what she'd just heard. What do you mean withdrawing it? I was already accepted. We paid the deposit. The university found out about the CPS investigation. They have a policy about not accepting students who are involved in child welfare cases. But it's not even a real case. Sarah said it was just monitoring. She said I wasn't in danger. I know, Mija. I tried to explain that to Dr. Walsh, but the university's legal department made the decision. They're worried about liability. For a long moment, Helga just stared at the journalism materials scattered across the table, the notebooks that were supposed to hold her interviews, the recorder that was meant to capture her first professional quality stories, the articles she'd been studying to prepare for the most important opportunity of her life. This is because of my videos, she said finally. Helga, no, it is. If I hadn't posted those stupid videos complaining about you, nobody would have called CPS, and I'd still be going to camp. Helga's voice was rising, but it wasn't anger. It was something closer to despair. You ruined my own future because I was mad at you for trying to protect me. Patricia reached across the table, trying to take Helga's hand, but her daughter pulled away. You weren't trying to protect me, Helga said, her voice breaking. You were trying to control me. And maybe you were right to do it. Maybe I can't handle freedom. Maybe I make terrible decisions that destroy everything good in my life. That's not true. Isn't it? Helga stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The first time I get any independence, I use it to broadcast our family problems to strangers on the internet. The first time you trust me, I end up under investigation by Child Protective Services. The first time I get accepted to something that could change my life, I lose it because of my own stupidity. Patricia watched her dog pace around their small kitchen, recognizing the self-blame and self-destruction that she'd struggled with herself after Helga's father left. Mija, listen to me. No, you listen to me, Helga whirled around to face her mother. Everyone was right. The people online who said you were toxic, the CPS workers who think you're fake changing just because they're watching, Dr. Walsh who thinks I'm some kind of at-risk kid who shouldn't be around normal college students, they're all right and we were stupid to think we could just fix everything with a few conversations. The words were like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. Patricia felt tears threatening, but she forced herself to stay calm, to be the parent Helga needed even when her daughter was pushing her away. That's not true, and you know it.
Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the moment the outside world found out about our problems, everything fell apart. Maybe we didn't actually fix anything. Maybe we just convinced ourselves we did. Helga grabbed her phone and headed toward the stairs. I'm going to my room, and before you ask, no, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to make a plan to fix it. I just want to be alone. Patricia listened to her daughter's footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of her bedroom door closing with a finality that felt like a physical blow. She sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the journalism materials that had represented so much hope just an hour ago. The next few days were the worst they'd experienced since before their big fight. Helga withdrew completely, speaking to Patricia only when absolutely necessary, spending most of her time in her room and showing none of the enthusiasm for life that had emerged over the past month. When Sarah Coleman called to schedule their next check-in visit, Helga barely participated in the conversation, giving one-word answers and staring at the floor. Helena seems quite withdrawn compared to our last visit, Sarah observed when she and Marcus finished their assessment. Is everything all right at home? Patricia found herself in the impossible position of having to explain that her daughter was depressed because an opportunity had been taken away due to the very investigation that was supposed to protect her. She lost her spot in a summer program because of the open case, Patricia explained. She's taking it hard. Marcus frowned. What kind of program? Journalism camp at the University of Washington. She was accepted months ago, but when they found out about the CPS involvement, they withdrew her acceptance. Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look that Patricia was beginning to recognize, the look of professionals trying to figure out if parents were telling the truth or manipulating the situation. "That's unfortunate," Sarah said carefully, "but there will be other opportunities." "Will there?" Patricia asked. "Because this case stays on file for 60 days, and college applications are due this fall. What happens when universities see that we've been investigated by Child Protective Services? What happens to her scholarship chances?" For the first time since this whole process began, Sarah looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Mrs. Martinez, I understand your concerns, but our job is to ensure Helena's safety and well-being. And what if the process you use to ensure her safety ends up destroying her future?" It was a question none of them could answer. That night, Patricia found Helga sitting on her bedroom floor, surrounded by college brochures and scholarship applications she'd been working on before the CPS investigation began. "What are you doing, mija?" "Trying to figure out which of these schools will still want me when they find out I've been investigated for child abuse." Helga's voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm thinking probably none of them." Patricia sat down on the floor next to her daughter, something she hadn't done since Helga was small. "The case isn't about child abuse. Does it matter? The university didn't care about the details. They just saw CPS investigation and decided I was too much of a risk." Helga picked up a brochure for Seattle University's journalism program. "I had a plan, you know? I was going to apply for early admission here, use my portfolio to show them my potential, maybe get a scholarship that would let me study something I actually care about." She tossed the brochure aside. "Now, I don't even have a portfolio." Patricia looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the defiant teenager who'd posted videos online, not the grateful daughter who'd been so excited about newfound freedom, but a young woman whose dreams had been crushed by a system that claimed to be helping her. "What if we fought it?" Patricia said suddenly. "Fought what?" "The university's decision. What if we got a lawyer, showed them that the case is about services and monitoring, not abuse? What if we proved that withdrawing your acceptance was discriminatory?" Helga looked at her mother with an expression Patricia couldn't read. "Mommy, we can't afford a lawyer. And even if we could, why would you want to fight for something that only happened because I betrayed our family online?" "Because you didn't betray our family. You told the truth about what wasn't working, and that truth forced us to change for the better. Because you deserve opportunities to pursue your dreams, and because I love you enough to fight anyone who tries to take those opportunities away from you, even if it's my fault they're in danger in the first place." For the first time since days, Helga met her mother's eyes. "It's not your fault, isn't it? If I hadn't been so controlling, if you hadn't been controlling, I wouldn't have felt like I needed to post those videos. If I hadn't posted the videos, CPS wouldn't have gotten involved. If CPS wouldn't have gotten involved, I'd still be going to journalism camp." Helga leaned back against her bed. "We can play the blame game forever, but it doesn't change the fact that my future is probably ruined." They sat in silence for a moment, mother and daughter surrounded by the remnants of dreams that felt increasingly out of reach. "What if it's not ruined?" Patricia said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet, but I know that giving up isn't the answer, and I know that whatever we figure out next, we're going to figure it out together."
Patricia Martinez had never considered herself a fighter. For most of her adult life, she'd been a survivor, someone who kept her head down, worked hard, and tried not to make waves that might put her family's stability at risk. But at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning, sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop open and a cup of cold coffee beside her, she realized that survival wasn't enough anymore. She'd been researching for 6 hours straight, diving deep into educational discrimination law, university policies, and the rights of families involved in child welfare investigations. What she'd discovered had ignited something in her that she didn't even know existed, a fierce, protective anger that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with justice. "Mommy?" Helga's voice came from the doorway, soft and confused. "Why are you still awake?" Patricia looked up to see her daughter standing in the kitchen entrance, wearing an oversized Roosevelt High School t-shirt and looking younger than her 17 years.
I couldn't sleep, Patricia said, gesturing to the dozens of browser tabs open on her screen. Come sit with me. I want to show you something. Helga padded over in her bare feet, settling into the chair beside her mother. What is this? This, Patricia said, clicking to a legal document she had found, is the Americans with Disabilities Act as it applies to educational discrimination. And this, she clicked to another tab, is a case from Oregon where a university was forced to reinstate a student who'd been dropped from a program due to a child welfare investigation that was later deemed unfounded. Helga rubbed her eyes, trying to focus on the legal text swimming across the screen. I don't understand. The University of Washington violated federal law when they dropped you from the journalism program, Patricia said, her voice carrying a certainty that surprised them both. They made an educational decision based on your involvement in a social services case without any evidence that you posed a risk to other students or the program itself. But they said it was about liability. They said a lot of things, but what they did was discriminate against you based on your family's involvement with a government agency. That's illegal. Patricia pulled up another document. I found 17 similar cases from the past 5 years. Universities, summer programs, even some high schools have been sued successfully for this exact same kind of discrimination. Helga stared at the screen, then at her mother. You want to sue the University of Washington? I want to fight for your right to pursue your education without being punished for seeking help when our family was struggling. Patricia closed the laptop and turned to face her daughter fully. Mija, I've spent your entire life trying to protect you by making you smaller, quieter, less noticeable. I thought if you didn't stand out, you wouldn't get hurt, but I was wrong. Mommy, let me finish. I was wrong because the world is going to try to make you smaller whether you fight back or not. People are going to look at where we come from, how much money we have, what struggles we've faced, and they're going to decide you don't deserve the same opportunities as kids from families that look perfect on paper. Patricia reached across the table and took Helga's hands in hers. Mija, I can't protect you from that by teaching you to hide. I can only protect you by teaching you to fight for what you deserve. For the first time in weeks, Helga saw something besides despair in her mother's eyes. There was determination there and something else, pride. You really think we can win? I think we can try, and I think trying is better than giving up. Patricia smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Helga had seen from her since the CPS investigation began. That afternoon, Patricia did something she'd never done in her 17 years as a single mother. She used a sick day, not because she was ill, but because her daughter needed her. Together, they walked into the office of Legal Aid Services of Seattle, a nonprofit that provided free legal assistance to low-income families. The lawyer who met with them was a woman named Catherine Torres, probably around Patricia's age, with the kind of confident demeanor that suggested she'd fought battles like this before. Educational discrimination cases are tricky, Catherine explained, after reviewing the timeline Patricia had carefully documented. Universities have broad discretion in their admissions decisions, and they'll argue that child welfare involvement represents a legitimate safety concern. But Helga was never in danger, Patricia protested. The CPS workers have said multiple times that there's no safety risk. I understand, and you're right, that the university's response seems disproportionate, but proving discrimination requires showing that they treated Helena differently than they would treat other students in similar circumstances. Catherine pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. Have either of you documented any of your communications with the university? Emails, phone call records, anything that shows their reasoning process? Patricia handed over a folder she'd prepared. Everything. The initial acceptance letter, the phone call where they withdrew it, my follow-up emails asking for reconsideration, their final rejection. As Catherine reviewed the documents, her expression grew increasingly interested. This is good, very good. They cite child welfare involvement as their reason for withdrawal, but they don't mention any specific safety concerns or behavioral issues. And look here, she pointed to one of the emails. They explicitly state that their decision is based solely on the open investigation status, not on any assessment of Helena as an individual. What does that mean? Helga asked.
It means they made a blanket policy decision to exclude all students involved in child welfare cases, regardless of the specific circumstances. That's exactly the kind of discrimination these laws are designed to prevent. For the first time since losing her spot at journalism camp, Helga felt a flutter of hope in her chest. There's something else, Catherine continued, turning to a fresh page in her legal pad. I'd like to contact some of the other families who faced similar situations. If we can show a pattern of this kind of discrimination, it strengthens your case significantly. Patricia leaned forward. How long would something like this take? If we file for an emergency injunction to restore Helena's spot in the program, we could potentially have a hearing within 2 weeks. The program doesn't start for another month, so there's still time. And if we lose? Catherine's expression grew serious. If we lose, you'd be responsible for the university's legal costs, which could be substantial. But given the strength of your documentation and the clear policy violation, I think we have better than even odds of success. Walking out of the legal aid office, Helga felt like she was seeing Seattle through different eyes. The city that had always felt like a place where opportunities went to other people suddenly seemed like somewhere she might actually belong. I can't believe you did all that research, she said as they waited for the bus back to Greenwood. I didn't even know those laws existed. Neither did I, Patricia admitted. But I learned something important over the past few weeks. Being a good mother isn't just about keeping you safe from the world. Sometimes it's about changing the world so it's safer for you. That evening, they called Madison's family to share the news. Madison's parents, David and Lynn Chen, had been quietly supportive throughout the CPS investigation, offering character references and emotional support without making Patricia feel judged or pitied. This is incredible, Lynn said over speakerphone. I had no idea universities could legally do that. They can't, Patricia said with satisfaction. That's the whole point. What can we do to help? Actually, Catherine had suggested they prepare character references from people who knew Helga well. If you'd be willing to write a letter about Helga's character and your observations of our family dynamic, that would be helpful. Of course, but beyond that, if there are legal costs or anything else you need. Patricia felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Thank you, but we're going to handle this ourselves. Helga and we're learning how to fight our own battles. After they hung up, Helga looked at her mother with an expression Patricia had never seen before, something that looked like admiration. You know what the weirdest part of all this is? Helga said. What? 6 months ago, if someone had told me that CPS would investigate our family and I'd lose my spot at journalism camp, I would have said it was the worst thing that could happen to us. Patricia nodded. And now? Now I think it might be the best thing. Not because of what happened, but because of how we're handling it. Helga curled up on the couch next to her mother, something she hadn't done since she was small. I get to see you fight for me. I get to learn that we don't have to accept it when people treat us unfairly. And I get to understand that our family is strong enough to take on the University of Washington if we have to. Patricia wrapped her arm around her daughter, marveling at how different this moment felt from all the times she'd tried to comfort Helga by promising to protect her from challenges. You know what I realized today? Patricia said. What? I spent so many years trying to prepare you for a world that would be unfair to you, but I never taught you that you had the power to make that world more fair. As they sat together in their small living room, surrounded by legal documents and college brochures and the journalism materials that had once represented impossible dreams, both Patricia and Helga understood that something fundamental had shifted. They weren't just mother and daughter anymore, or even just a family that had learned to communicate better. They were partners in the fight for Helga's future. And for the first time in either of their lives, they truly believed they could win.
The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early June, exactly 18 days before the journalism camp was set to begin. Patricia had taken the entire day off work, something that would have been unthinkable to her just months earlier, and sat beside Helga in the federal courthouse in downtown Seattle, both of them wearing their best clothes and carrying a folder thick with evidence. Catherine Torres had prepared them thoroughly for what to expect, but nothing could have prepared Helga for the sight of the University of Washington's legal team, 4 lawyers in expensive suits, each carrying briefcases that probably cost more than Patricia made in a month. "Don't let them intimidate you," Catherine whispered as they took their seats. "David and Goliath stories exist for a reason." Judge Margaret Chen, no relation to Madison's family, though Helga found the coincidence reassuring, called the hearing to order at 9:30 a.m. sharp. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book. "This is an emergency motion for injunctive relief," Judge Chen began, "filed by Helga Martinez against the University of Washington, alleging educational discrimination based on involvement in a child welfare investigation. Ms. Torres, you may proceed with your opening statement." Catherine stood, and Helga was struck by how confident she looked facing down the university's legal army. "Your Honor, this case is about a 17-year-old girl who did everything right. Helga Martinez earned excellent grades, demonstrated leadership in extracurricular activities, and was accepted to a competitive summer program based solely on her merit. The University of Washington withdrew that acceptance not because of anything Helga did wrong, but because her family sought help during a difficult time." She gestured towards Helga and Patricia. "The university's decision sends a chilling message that families who engage with social services, even voluntarily, even successfully, will be punished educationally. This is not only morally wrong, it's legally prohibited under federal anti-discrimination statutes." The university's lead attorney, a stern-looking man named Robert Fieldstone, presented their case with the kind of polished confidence that came from years of defending institutional decisions. "Your Honor, the University of Washington has a responsibility to ensure the safety and well-being of all participants. When we learned of an active Child Protective Services investigation involving Ms. Martinez, we made a prudent decision to protect other students and limit our liability exposure." Judge Chen leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Fieldstone, can you point to any evidence that Ms. Martinez posed a risk to other students?" "The very fact of CPS involvement suggests—" "I didn't ask what it suggests. I asked for evidence." Fieldstone shuffled through his papers. "Your Honor, we have a duty to err on the side of caution when it comes to student safety." "And Ms. Martinez has a right to equal treatment under federal law," Judge Chen replied dryly. "Ms. Torres, I'd like to hear from your clients directly. Ms. Martinez, would you please tell me about your academic record and your interest in journalism?" Helga stood on shaky legs, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone in the courtroom could hear it. This was it, her one chance to speak for herself, to prove that she deserved the same opportunities as any other student. "Your Honor, I've maintained a 3.8 GPA throughout high school while working part-time as a math tutor. I'm the editor-in-chief of our school newspaper, and I've written articles about mental health resources that have helped other students. I applied to the UW journalism program because I want to tell stories that matter, stories that help people understand each other better." She paused, gathering courage for what she wanted to say next. "The university says they were protecting other students from me, but they never asked what kind of person I am. They never looked at my character references, my writing samples, or my volunteer work at the community center. They just saw CPS investigation and decided I wasn't worth the risk." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "But here's what they didn't understand. The reason CPS got involved in the first place is because I cared enough about my family to seek help when we were struggling. I posted videos online because I wanted to connect with other kids who felt trapped and alone. I wasn't trying to hurt my mom. I was trying to save our relationship." Helga looked at Patricia, sitting proudly in the gallery.
And it worked. My mom and I learned how to communicate, how to trust each other, how to be a real family. But according to the university, that makes me dangerous. Judge Chen nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Mrs. Martinez, I understand you've been working with Child Protective Services throughout this process. Can you tell me about that experience? Patricia stood, and Helga was amazed by how composed her mother looked. Gone was the anxious, defensive woman who'd opened the door to CPS workers 2 months earlier. In her place was someone who radiated quiet strength. Your Honor, the CPS investigation was the best thing that ever happened to our family, not because we needed to be investigated, but because it forced us to confront problems we'd been avoiding. I was overprotective to the point of being controlling, and my daughter was so frustrated that she felt like she had to tell strangers online about our problems. But instead of seeing that as a family that was willing to work hard to improve, the university saw it as a reason to exclude my daughter from opportunities she'd earned. They punished her for our honesty, for our willingness to grow and change. My daughter didn't just survive a difficult family situation, she helped solve it. She showed maturity, resilience, and leadership. Those are exactly the qualities universities should want in their students. After both sides had presented their evidence and called their witnesses, including Sarah Coleman from CPS, who testified that the Martinez family had made remarkable progress and posed no safety concerns, Judge Chen called a brief recess.
Helga and Patricia sat in the courthouse hallway, neither of them able to eat the sandwiches Catherine had brought for lunch. Whatever happens, Patricia said, I'm proud of us for fighting. Me too, Helga replied. Even if we lose, at least we didn't just accept it. When court reconvened, Judge Chen wasted no time delivering her ruling. This case presents a clear example of educational discrimination based on social services involvement, she began. The University of Washington's policy of automatically excluding students involved in child welfare investigations, regardless of individual circumstances, violates federal anti-discrimination statutes. Helga felt her heart stop. Furthermore, the evidence presented shows that Ms. Martinez not only poses no risk to other students, but demonstrates exactly the kind of personal growth and resilience that educational programs should foster. The university's decision was not based on legitimate safety concerns, but on unfounded assumptions about families involved with social services. Judge Chen looked directly at the university's legal team. The University of Washington is hereby ordered to immediately reinstate Helga Martinez to the journalism program with full privileges and accommodations. Additionally, the university will provide Ms. Martinez with a formal letter of apology and will review its policies regarding students involved in child welfare investigations to ensure compliance with federal law. The gavel came down with a sound that seemed to echo through Helga's entire body. They had won! The weeks that followed felt like living in a different world. The University of Washington not only reinstated Helga's spot in the journalism program, but assigned her a personal advisor to ensure her transition went smoothly. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had delivered the devastating phone call withdrawing Helga's acceptance, personally called to apologize and welcome her back to the program. More importantly, the case had attracted media attention. The Seattle Times ran a feature story about educational discrimination against families involved in social services, using Helga's case as an example of systemic bias. 3 other families contacted Catherine Torres about similar situations, leading to a broader investigation of university policies throughout Washington state. On the first day of journalism camp, Patricia drove Helga to the University of Washington campus with a car full of supplies and a heart full of pride. They stood together outside the dormitory where Helga would spend the next 3 weeks, both of them marveling at how far they'd come. You know what's funny? Helga said, shouldering her backpack. 6 months ago, I thought the biggest problem in my life was having an overprotective mother. Patricia laughed. And I thought the biggest problem in my life was having a rebellious daughter. Turns out we were both wrong. Turns out the biggest problem was that we weren't fighting the right battles. We were fighting each other instead of fighting for each other. As they hugged goodbye, Helga whispered,
Thank you for teaching me that I don't have to accept unfairness just because I'm young, or because we don't have money, or because people think families like ours don't deserve better. Thank you for teaching me that protecting you means preparing you to change the world, not hide from it. That evening, alone in their apartment for the first time in weeks, Patricia sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, but instead of researching legal cases or writing character references, she was doing something she hadn't done in years. She was writing about her own dreams. The community college had evening classes in business administration. With Helga's scholarship to journalism camp covering most expenses, Patricia could afford to take one class per semester. It would take years to complete a degree, but for the first time in her adult life, years felt like possibility instead of just survival. Meanwhile, across town in her university dorm room, Helga was writing too. Not complaints about her family or desperate appeals to strangers online, but the beginning of what would become her first published article. How fighting for my education taught me to fight for my family. 3 months later, when CPS officially closed their case with the finding of successful family preservation, neither Helga nor Patricia felt like celebrating. The investigation that had once seemed like their biggest crisis had become the catalyst for the most important growth of their lives. Instead of celebration, they felt gratitude for the legal system that had protected Helga's rights, for the community that had supported them, for the courage they'd found to stand up for what they deserved. But mostly, they felt grateful for each other, for a mother who had learned that love sometimes means letting go and sometimes means holding on tight, for a daughter who had discovered that growing up meant not just claiming independence, but understanding interdependence. As Helga began her senior year of high school with college acceptance letters already arriving and scholarship offers on the table, and as Patricia started her second semester of business classes with dreams of opening her own healthcare consulting firm, both women understood that their story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. And this time, they were writing it together.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.